Chapter 6. The pigeon coop became our home, and no Nazi was the wiser. I was old enough that my parents couldn't keep me inside all the time now. I took my mother's place in line for our rations, and sometimes my father and I were pulled off the street to work outside the ghetto. But each day we returned to our little sanctuary on the roof and slid the steel bars down tight to protect us. My mother began to talk again and to smile. But every now and then I would catch her staring at the door to the roof, and I knew what she was thinking. The home invasions continued without warning, slowly bleeding everything of value the ghetto still hoarded. And once a week, on the Sabbath, the Nazis would conduct resettlements. When they came and took more people away, thousands at a time, pushed into trucks and taken to villages in the east. Some who were taken escaped and sneaked back to tell the ghetto and told stories of camps where Jews were worked to death. My father told me not to listen to the rumors, but we were still careful to bar the big steel door at the top of the stairs every night. And every time we heard cries and screams of a new resettlement, we huddled in fear. I was almost 13 years old now, and it was hard to remember any other life, except for my daydreams of food. Big old stew with meat and mushrooms and cabbage, roast chicken, cucumber salad, pierogi filled with potatoes, cheese, and onions fried in butter, cheesecake, apple tarts. I would have traded a week's worth of rations just to have another pot of my mother's delicious tomato soup. With each passing day, I grew thinner and thinner until hunger was my constant companion. I longed for nighttime and the blessed relief sleep brought. The only time I didn't think about eating was when I was asleep. One cold February day, the director of the Judenrat called for a ghetto-wide meeting in Zotsky Square, and my father and I went to hear what he had to say. The director was not a popular man. The members of the Judenrat were hated throughout the ghetto for working with the Nazis. But any man the Nazis assigned to the Judenrat who refused was shot or hanged, so I didn't see what choice they had. Some of the Judenrat police enjoyed their new jobs too much. It was true. But there were others who tried to do what the Germans told them without making things worse for their fellow Jews. The square was crowded, but not everyone in the ghetto was there. Not nearly. The director could tell this too. He checked his watch one last time and bent forward to speak into the microphone. "When I call for a meeting, all of you must come," he told us. "Tell your neighbors hiding away will not always help." I glanced nervously at my father. "We're afraid we'll be taken away," someone yelled. "Or shot and killed in the street," someone else said. The director signaled for everyone to settle down. "My friends, I come to you with a terrible request, but one which I have no choice but to accede to. The Nazis have ordered me to give them 7,000 Jews to be deported from the Krakow ghetto tomorrow morning." The crowd came alive with murmurs and sobs and shouts. 7,000 Jews, I thought, trying to comprehend a number so big. There had been resettlements going on all the while, but nothing on this scale. Never so many people. "We can do nothing about this. 7,000 people will be deported, but we can choose who will go and who will remain." "You can choose, you mean?" someone yelled. "The Germans need good, healthy workers here in the ghetto," the director said. "You call this healthy?" a man cried. "I haven't eaten meat in a year." Others in the crowd shouted angrily that they were starving. I nodded, feeling my own hunger pangs. "If we prove ourselves useful to the German war effort, they will take fewer of us away. They will keep us here and keep us alive," the director said. "We must therefore think carefully about who we will send away and who remains. We must give them those who cannot work." More murmuring among the crowd. "Who can he mean?" I asked my father. Everyone in the ghetto worked. Even my mother had been taken to the factories when she was caught out on the streets. "My friends," the director said, "I must reach out my arms and beg. Mothers and fathers, give me your children." The crowd in the square erupted with rage. Angry shouts were raised from every mouth. Fists shook in the air. An empty green bottle flew through the air and shattered at the base of the stage where the director stood. I was scared, but I felt angry too. I held on to my father's arm. "They go to a better place," the director said, ducking a rock. "The children will be sent to resettlement camps." "Work camps," someone near me yelled. "Death camps," another person cried. "I am trying to save lives," the director roared. "Do you understand? Which is better, that 40,000 of us remain or that the whole population perish? We must choose." "They can't do this," I told my father. "Why does he get to choose who goes and who stays?" The reality was starting to hit me. I was going to be sent to a camp. I was going to be sent away from my mother and father, away from my home. The crowd yelled and argued with the director, surging toward the stage. My father put his hands on my shoulders and steered me away. "Come, Yannick, let's go." I couldn't believe what I'd heard. "Papa, how can he ask such a thing?" "Because the Nazis have promised not to take him and his family, and people will do anything to protect their families. He should know that better than anyone." "I don't want to go. Don't let them take me," I said. I could feel myself trembling, but I didn't want to let on just how deeply terrified I truly was. "They won't," my father told me. "I'll protect you," he smiled. "Besides, tomorrow you will no longer be a child. Will you, Jan? Do you think I've forgotten it's your birthday?" To be honest, I had thought he would forget. Mother, too. There was nothing to mark the days now, except the Sabbath, and we had to observe that in secret anyway. But I knew tomorrow was my 13th birthday, the day I would officially become a man. I wanted to look up what the Sabbath was. They've talked about it a couple different times, and if you go to church, you might have heard this word before, but the Sabbath is often a day of religious observance and abstinence from work, which means you don't work that day, kept by Jews from Friday evening to Saturday. So, like, we go to church on Sunday, but to the Jews, the Sabbath is Saturday. Your mother and I have said nothing because how can we possibly hold a bar mitzvah for you? If we're caught celebrating it, we'll be killed. I nodded. I've been looking forward to my bar mitzvah for as long as I could remember, but now it wasn't going to happen. It couldn't. "Still," my father said, like he could read my mind, "we will celebrate it." "But how?" "Tonight," my father told me. "Go to sleep in your clothes." That night I lay awake in my clothes, tossing and turning. My bar mitzvah, I thought. A bar mitzvah is a ceremony in which a Jewish boy becomes a man. The first time he reads aloud from the Torah. Usually all of my school friends and aunts and uncles and cousins would have come to see me read in the synagogue. There would have been a kiddush after the service with challah rolls, potatoes, chicken. My stomach growled just thinking about it. But of course, there was no synagogue anymore, and no challah rolls or potatoes or chicken. A few hours must have passed before I heard my father stir. My mother, too. I sat up on my mattress and waited while my father pulled on his coat. "We must be quiet," my father whispered. "Like the night we went to Abraham's bakery." I nodded and stood. My mother came to me and hugged me tight. "Come back to me a man, my Yannick. Only come back." "I will," I promised her. Mother kissed me on the cheek and walked us to the steel door that protected our rooftop home. She slid the metal bars back in place when we were through and made our way quietly down the dark stairs of our apartment building. Tonight there was no snow, but it was cold. We could see the breath from our noses. I pushed my hands down into my pockets as far as they would go and wished I hadn't outgrown my gloves. Father led me through the back alleys again. Once we turned a corner to find another night stalker. It was a Jewish boy carrying a bag of something over his shoulder. Food, I guessed, smuggled through some hole in the wall. And all three of us gasped. When it was clear that none of us was a Nazi, we all hurried on our way without a word. But We were even more cautious than before. Our path took us toward the wall, and at first I wondered if Father meant to take us out. We climbed into an old abandoned warehouse building that stood along the wall of Dabrowski Street. Almost every window was broken and open to the sighing wind, and the rotten wood floor had holes in it. There were stairs at the back, narrow and rickety, and occasionally missing a tread, and down we went into the basement. I wasn't exactly where I had imagined it, celebrating one of the biggest milestones in my life, but I followed along without a word. There were men in the basement waiting for us. My Uncle Abraham and Moshe, my cousin David, 2 more men I recognized as friends of my father, and 3 more I didn't know. One of them held a set of Torah scrolls in a burlap sack, saved, perhaps, from one of the ghetto's synagogues before it burned to the ground. The men whispered hello. Ordinarily, my uncles and cousins would have embraced us and talked, but everyone was too scared of being out after curfew to say anything more. My stomach grumbled loud in the silent basement, reminding me that now that I was awake, I should be finding it some food. The stairs creaked behind us, and we all turned. My heart was in my throat. If we were caught down here, together, with a Torah in hand, we would never become a man. I would never become a man. I would be shot dead on sight. But the shoes we saw coming down were not the glistening boot of an SS officer. They were the brown leather soles of Mr. Tataka from down the hall. Now we are 10 men, my father whispered. He smiled at me, and soon we shall be 11. I'm sorry we did not have more time for your studies, Yannick. Just do your best. The Torah scrolls were taken out and unrolled so I could read from them. My Hebrew was rough, but before the Nazis, I would have been at a synagogue once or twice a week ahead of time practicing for this. But of course, that was impossible now. I muddled through as if God or man heard anything amiss. Neither of them called me on it. When I finished, my father chanted a blessing over me in the place of our rabbi who had been killed by the Germans. He prayed in Hebrew and then spoke in Polish. Yannick, my son, he said, looking at me solemnly, you are a man now, with all the duties of an adult under the Jewish law. You are now responsible for your own sins, but also for your own goodness. Remember what the Talmud teaches. Life is but a river. It has no beginning, no middle, no end. All we are worth, is what we do while we float on it. How we treat our fellow man. Remember this, and a good man you will be. I will, Father, I said. I had waited for this day, looked forward to it for years. Suddenly, it didn't matter that we weren't in a synagogue and that we didn't have a feast waiting for us afterward. The smile on my father's face filled me with pride. The men all shook my hand and wished me Mazel Tov before hurrying off. They're leaving tonight, most of them, Moshe told us. Trying to escape before tomorrow's deportation. 7,000? Never so many. We'll survive, my father told him. Come to our pigeon coop and hide with us. Oscar and his river, Uncle Moshe said. You should talk some sense into him now that you're a man, Yannick. The man who falls asleep on the river drowns. All right, this quote, but each day we returned to our little sanctuary on the roof while the home invasions continued without warning, slowly bleeding everything of value the ghetto still hoarded. I think Peyton talked about this the other day, Peyton Johnson. Where is your sanctuary, it asks. A sanctuary is a place of protection or safety. And one way for the writer to make emphasis or intensify a scene is to place it close to its opposite. This is called juxtaposition. This technique is used often in this particular novel. Things that are really safe compared to things that are really dangerous. The sanctuary of the roof is described near the bleeding of the home invasion. So They're in their safe little pigeon coop, but they're right beneath them, right below them, right next to them is people being murdered and killed and taken off. That's what juxtaposition is. In the resettlements, were the worst thing that could happen on the Sabbath, which was the holiest, most festive day of the week they talked about. Some of the meals that he described for that he was so hungry for, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing them correctly, but bigos or Polish hunter stew is made of meat, cabbage, and other vegetables. So that's what it looks like. The cucumber salad is made with cucumbers, sour cream, lemon juice, and dill or chives. And then the pigorgi is fried dough filled with potatoes, cheese, and onions. Pretty good. Here's a picture of Jews being forced out of the ghetto for resettlements in the East, they said. This is the definition of the bar mitzvah is a spiritual ceremony where a Jewish boy becomes a man, traditionally at the age of 13. Torah, Jewish holy writings written in Hebrew that correspond to the Old Testament of the Bible. Instead of a book with pages, the Torah is handwritten on a very long scroll, just like this. A rabbi is a Jewish religious leader, like a preacher sort of guys, a scholar or a teacher. The Talmud is a collection of writings that covers all of Jewish law and tradition. So these are Jewish books and documents. Mazel tov, a Jewish phrase wishing good luck or congratulations. A metaphor, a direct comparison of two unlike things that does not use like or as. So they use the metaphor of life being a river. It has no beginning, no middle, no end. We're all we are worth is what we do while we float upon it, how we treat our fellow men. So that was a metaphor for your behavior. All right. Deportation, we heard that word used, is the act of forcing a person out of the country. The Nazis were not actually deporting Jews. They were imprisoning and killing them. But they used the word deport, so they didn't realize what was happening. They wouldn't run. They wouldn't fight extra hard. In 1939, this is the number of Jews that lived in Krakow, 70,000. And by March of 1941, 55,000 had been expelled or kicked out. How many Jews remain in the Pogorski ghetto? Around 15,000. Guys, you're going from 70,000 in all of Krakow to 15,000. And then there were 5,000 more brought in. And then by the spring of 42, there were 20,000 Jews in the ghetto part. The Jews were deported and killed in the spring of 1942, 1,500 of them. And 18,500 Jews remained in the ghetto in 1942 in the spring. 7,000 Jews were deported in 1942, 1,000 killed. This is going on to our next chapter. Jews remained in the ghetto the summer of 1942. Jews deported in August 1942, 600 killed, including 300 kids. So, not a good thing.